Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Common Cause podcast in what is going to be our third episode. Quite a transition, quite a big step in our podcast. We are now in the same room. How about that? So, first of all, I'd like to say a huge thank you on behalf of myself and Luca for all the support we've had in the first two episodes. We were quite overwhelmed, actually. It's great, just the amount of support we've been getting and such amazing positive feedback, some constructive criticism where necessary, but a lot of that's been addressed. That's part of the reason why we're here in the room.
Such as the Zoom call, it was just temporary, but the lighting was awful.
The Zoom call was
apologise on my side for
a temporary means to an end, but here we are now. So without further ado, we trust you've read the title of today's podcast. You know we'll be discussing Pope Leo's first and newest encyclical, Magnifica, Humanitas. But before that, we're going to be doing...
I thought you were going to say first and last then.
Before that, we're going to be doing our first question time.
Can I just start by saying it is June, so I want to say happy month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus to all of our Catholic listeners out there.
Happy month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. If you have your flags, get them up.
There's no other big months like this in June. Not what they celebrate. This is what I celebrate in June. But let's go into the questions.
Very topical. So we've had around 3 questions. We had many questions in one comment. You'll see we've managed to condense that down. Yeah. But please keep the questions coming. We want to make this a regular occurrence on our episodes, and it's great to hear your feedback. When you're commenting as well, don't feel like it just has to be a question. You can also give us your thoughts on the episode. Has it provoked anything in your mind? What your thoughts are regarding the topic? But yeah, questions, keep them coming. So let's begin with our first question time. So question 1 is from one of our viewers on Spotify. I'm going to use this opportunity to say we do also have a Spotify for those who aren't aware. So if you get fed up of looking at our lovely faces and just want to listen to our lovely voices instead, head over to Spotify. We upload all our episodes onto Spotify at the same time as our YouTube episodes. So yeah, first question from our Spotify viewers. If you could be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, what would be the first 3 things you would change or introduce? I'll allow Luca to answer this one.
This is a 1 or 3, sorry. I missed that.
The first 3 things you would change or introduce.
So what I would start with, I'm assuming I can be a bit out there and not have to be that realistic. It's like, can I do that?
That's fine. Look, this is you as Prime Minister.
But we're just going to say I'm a bit of a dictator, Prime Minister. So, firstly, what I would do, I would love to help the British people, and I think this would be a very effective policy. You may disagree, but I would like to raise the minimum threshold you start paying tax at, because it's not been raised for so many years, and but look at everything else going up, inflation, everything, so it's not fair. So I think that would help the cost of living and be a popular policy, I would hope. I wouldn't do what Reform are doing with the tax on overtime. But my second one would be a complete ban on abortion and euthanasia from coming into any more bills coming into Parliament. I'll try my best to go into Parliament and push back on abortion as well, but make sure euthanasia doesn't come through with my majority government. I would whip up all my MPs. And thirdly, I've not decided yet, but yeah, I've just thought of 2 there. So
if I'm sure if anything comes to you, you can go ahead. 3 things I would do as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. First thing I'd do is I'd look at the curriculum of the country, the way education is done, and education seriously needs to change. We not only have culturally a big problem in education where teachers are pushing through certain agendas as directed by the government, but also, generally speaking, I don't think education is working for the core of what it is. Pragmatically, most people would say the point of education is to prepare the future generation to get a job, and I think that's slightly cynical. That is quite disheartening to some young people in this country. And the truth is, education is more than just preparing you to go out into the world of work. It's also instilling values in you. It's part of your formation as an individual. It plays a big role alongside perhaps your faith and how your family brings you up. So for me, Luca knows my mantra with education. It's for the pursuit of wisdom and excellence, and that is the education system I would try and build as Prime Minister. An education system that thrives on the values of wisdom. So being able to instill wisdom in our young people, so they can go out into the world and spread on that knowledge, and also just really promoting a culture of diligence, of hard work. And that sort of leads on to my next policy, which is actually very similar to Luca's, involving the tax. And that is just essentially the same thing, just making sure that those people at the bottom of the tax brackets aren't being taxed perhaps as harshly. So I'm not entirely sure how I'd do that, whether I'd look at the threshold, raising the threshold from 12.5 grand to something like 20 grand, or whether I'd instead change the percentages at the bottom. But we need a real culture where you have motivation to go into work, as opposed to using the system, the welfare system, as a means of getting by. Third policy. How radical do I want to be? Radical. How radical do I want to be? Radical. I mean, we're thinking of having an episode in the future. It's going to probably come up today, actually. If we're discussing Leo XIV, then we're bound to discuss Leo XIII as well, and his thoughts on economic policy, particularly Catholic corporatism and distributism. I don't think Britain is. I think as a liberal Western democracy, we are too far down the line to actually make such a big drastic change towards a complete distributist economy. However, there are small steps that a government could take potentially to moving towards that sort of system. So making taxes on businesses, relieving those taxes, making it more beneficial for these businesses to get up and running at the very bottom. It's all well and good having big business at the top, but homegrown business is where an economy flourishes for the common good of all of its people. So making it easier for those businesses to get started up, and also linking back to my second point, which was just making it more rewarding for people to work in those businesses. Yeah.
We've just got one more policy. I saw Rupert Lowe sort of introduce a new policy the other day that I actually like this one. He said those who are on benefits and haven't got a job in a certain number of months, we make them work. So they will go up and do community service, basically. Otherwise, their benefits will cease to exist. Because then, even though they can't get a job, they are doing something, and not just. I think the British people would understand. They won't be scrutinised as much as just sitting on benefits all day. And obviously, there's some people who do need benefits, but something like job seekers allowance, or the young people with so many mental health issues, they could go and actually give back to the country in a way like this.
Yeah. So there you have it. There's your reason as to why, if anything happens in the future, you should or shouldn't vote for us. So our second question, this viewer would like us to talk about, and this is quoted from the comment section, who is really running the UK government and making decisions? Alongside these two further questions, why is the media feeling the need to push their own independent narratives, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on as a viewer of that media? And finally, when and why did flying the Union Jack become an issue? Something very pertinent to us, I think, as a podcast, for reasons we won't go into. So, Luca, do you want to try and tackle that first point?
I want to just go to the second one, because I actually disagree with the viewer respectfully, because I don't think that maybe I've interpreted your question wrong, viewer, but I don't think the media has their sort of own independent view. I think, let's look at the BBC, look how biased it is, and how can we say that's independent? That's clearly a left-wing view. Now, I'm not saying GB News isn't on the right. Obviously, GB News is on the right wing, but they're privately funded, not by the taxpayers. So I don't think the BBC has an independent agenda, as much as they would like to say they do. This may be radical of me, but I would actually suggest they have a definite left-wing bias. Let's just look what happened with Trump earlier on in the year. To tackle the first question, who really runs the the government. I don't know.
Would you like to phone a friend on that one?
Yeah, I don't want to answer currently. Yeah.
I think regarding the second point about the media pushing their narratives, I think that's more a case of rather than saying the media bodies, so it's the BBC who comes up with these things. Perhaps that is linked to the first question in that there is clearly some sort of unilateral narrative that both government or who's behind the government and the media who is also on board with this, what that narrative that they're pushing. So my interpretation of that first question, how I'd answer it, is that the British politics has got currently and has had for decades, as far back as you might be able to remember, some sort of predetermined establishment. It's the establishment that you'll hear both left-wing Green Party referring to, where they refer to it as the billionaires and the billionaire class, and Reform UK, they'll be referring to it as what they call the Uni Party, so the Labour government and the Tory governments who've been running this country uninterrupted since the end of the Liberal governments in the late 1910s after the First World War. So the way I'd answer that question is that very clearly in British politics there is that set establishment, and that establishment is very comfortable on doing whatever they can to stay in power. You'll see it with the Labour government, where Keir Starmer is perhaps admitting now that he's accepting that if he stays in charge of the Labour Party, he doesn't really think they'll be able to see through the next election. I mean, I don't even think that's an opinion anymore. I think that's fact.
Yeah.
That's perhaps why he's allowed Andy Burnham to stand in Makerfield, and I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you who will win that election.
Andy Burnham.
Whether Andy Burnham actually loses that will prove to be very interesting. So Labour are very happy doing what they can to stay in power. It's the same with the Tory party. I mean, Tories clung on for 14 long and difficult years through austerity, through Brexit, and through COVID as well.
Russia, Ukraine.
Some would argue that after the disastrous premiership of Liz Truss, an election should have been called then and there. That would have been the more honest thing to do. But of course, that didn't happen until perhaps as late as they could have prolonged it to. Another thing I'd like to reference is what you've recently seen in, I think, the Worcestershire County Council, where the Tories have actually agreed to run the council with the Green Party in order to keep out reform. That is quite ludicrous, I think. You've got two parties that are rather opposite on the spectrum, you'd think, politically, yet they're coming together to agree to run a council together. Does that really mean they're on opposite sides of the spectrum, or is there something going on behind the scenes that perhaps the viewer is alluding to and I'm also alluding to here? That's my opinions on that question. As for the media, that is just an extension of the establishment, is it not? I mean, GB News is probably one of the only media platforms who can claim to be not part of the establishment, though it has plenty of critics who'd say it's just a mouthpiece of Nigel Farage. I personally don't think it is. I think there's plenty of ex-Tories on there who would also disagree with it. Jacob Rees-Mogg, still a member of the Tory party, would definitely have his fair things to say on whether it's a mouthpiece of Nigel Farage or not. But the BBC, The Guardian, notoriously left-wing, The Telegraph, right-wing, The Sun, they were formerly the mouthpiece of Nigel Farage. They were famously Eurosceptic for so long, and part of the reason some might argue that the Brexit referendum went the way it did. That's my opinions on that question. The final question, which is regarding the Union Jack from this viewer. Luca, what's your take on that? When and why did flying the Union Jack become an issue?
Well, when did it become an issue? I don't know.
It's a good question.
When did it? I don't know. It's just so sad. I think this is terrible. We've had my own things in the past with the Union Jack, trying to put it up and advertise it or wear it on my lapel, and I've been told off for it and told to take it off. And there's this illusion by some lefty lunatics that it is actually a symbol of racism of the British Empire. And I suppose over time this has sort of grown. But I'm glad that patriots recently have tried to retake the flag and not let it be put down, because it's a symbol of our country. You know, look at America. They have every single lawn. When we went to New York on a trip, they had flags at every single shop. left, right, what houses, everything. I think that's a great thing, and we need to bring it back. I don't know when. I'm not old enough to say when it sort of became like this, but I'm glad it's being revived.
My take on that question, it sort of links to my response for what I said about being prime minister, where it involves education. And there's this big thing where now you've got young people being told that there's something to be ashamed about. You, as a young person who was born long after the British Empire fell, have something to be ashamed about. And isn't that just so stupid? Like, let's take us for example. What have we got as British citizens to be ashamed about in that flag?
Nothing.
What have we got? Absolutely nothing. I mean, in fact,
we've got something to be pleased with. We've got a cross, the cross of Christianity on our flag.
The cross of St. George. I mean, I've got my icon of St. George up there somewhere. Look, there's things to aspire to when you look at the British flag and what it symbolises. We could do a whole episode on the British Empire and regarding this debate.
Good shout.
Is the British Empire something that we should be, oh, boo, who cares? Or should we be championing some of the things the British Empire stood for? Rule of law, Westminster democracy, the right to free speech, things that Britain exported across the globe and is still in place in so many of those Commonwealth countries today. That, to me, is what the British flag stands for. It unifies people. If you go out to second, third generation immigrants today and you ask them, is that your flag? They will proudly say, yes, that is my flag. This is the country I belong to. This is my home. And then just because you've got people on the left and you've got the media and you've got people who are first generation and who aren't keen on integrating and belonging to that nation, who tell you, you know what, that's not something you should be proud about. We should look to other flags that unite us. Flags that are new, they're artificial. There's nothing behind those flags. I think Luke can know what flags I'm alluding to. I mean, we're in a very relevant month for that sort of thing, aren't we, today?
Well, what are you on about? So it's only the month of the sacred heart of Jesus,
You know? That's completely ludicrous. We've got a flag that unites everyone in this country, no matter your colour, your culture, your creed. That's something that you can get behind, and that's something you can stand for. When the World Cup's on, you can put your flag up on your car and on outside your house, and it unites you. When the Commonwealth Games, when it's the Olympics, all these things, it's beautiful. That's what the flag stands for. And just because you've got idiots telling you that, it doesn't actually mean that, you shouldn't listen to them. You know in your heart, and I'm reaching out to the viewers here, you know inside of you what that flag stands for, and that's why we've had someone comment about it. There's nothing to be ashamed about.
And that's why we're ordering one to put in the background of the podcast.
Of course, eventually expect us to have a flag in the background. Yes. That could be very exciting.
Yes.
Do you have anything else you'd like to say on the flag topic?
No, I want to keep it moving.
Let's keep it moving with our final question of today's question time. So this viewer, also on YouTube, wants us to talk about the importance of critical thinking, how critical thinking can be encouraged, or how it can be taught without an agenda. What do you think about this, Luca?
I think it's near impossible to teach something without an agenda. Let's just look, if I go to school and I learn economics or politics, well, every teacher has an opinion, and it's extremely difficult to not voice that opinion when you're teaching something. So right through the whole education system, it will always be very difficult to teach something, especially if it's something like politics or critical thinking. But critical thinking, I think, back to what you were saying, if you're Prime Minister, we need to do more critical thinking in schools. Just tests is not critical thinking. It's memorizing information, for example. I think that needs to be changed. If you look at the great schools of the past, years and years ago, ancient Greece, it was philosophy, it was thinking about this stuff, deciding your own thing, asking questions, not just learn this formula and put it on a paper for a grade. So I think the whole thing needs changing, especially in schools. It will be difficult to do, and a massive culture shift. But something like this, yeah.
I mean, this is a part of where I might perhaps be controversial in saying that. Reform UK are one of their policies that they've thrown out there that they would do is that in universities they would completely fund the tuition fees of students wanting to study STEM subjects, because they view STEM subjects as being the ones that are most important for our innovators in our economy, those who will leave university and go on to become engineers or doctors or things like this.
And engineers.
And I would slightly push back on that and say, well, you can't devalue the humanities. I mean, perhaps this is a personal plea from myself regarding the subjects that I'm interested in and I enjoy studying, but it's no shock that and no surprise that when you look to the great academic institutions in this country, some of which are unfortunately becoming overrun with complete lefty liberal nonsense.
Cambridge.
So Oxford, Cambridge, and then you've got the public schools of Eton and Harrow. What they used to champion in their way of teaching, it was subjects like Latin and philosophy and history. And there is real value in these subjects because when taught in the right way, not in a way with agenda or with personal opinion, this is perhaps idealistic and impossible, but I'm just going to say my opinions on it anyway. When they're taught in the right way, it encourages its students to look to the past, look to history, look to philosophical theory and the great thinkers in our modern times and in ancient times as well, and think, well, how did they reach these conclusions, and how can I, as an individual, also come to reach my own conclusions? That's where the value in critical thinking comes in. Do I think it's possible ever to teach those kinds of subjects in that way? It would require a lot of time. It would require a shift culturally, like Lucas said, where you need a government who is unafraid to crack down on these policies and say, look, we need to change things up, and go ahead and commit to it, regardless of the pushback from certain aspects of society, from certain aspects of Parliament. Ignore the pushback, push on with the agenda, and let's get it through. And eventually, perhaps in this country, there'll be an education system that promotes things like critical thinking.
I mean, just on the subjects like Latin, like who does Latin at A level? No one. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's being removed.
Yeah, they're removing Latin A level.
I think it was the Labour government, but it just shows like we're going in the wrong direction. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
So with that, those are all the questions we have time for today. If anything in that question time provoked your thoughts, leave a comment below.
Please leave comments, yes.
We'll be sure to address comments in future episodes. And without further ado, we'll be moving on from question time to the main body of our episode today on Pope Leo's first encyclical, Magnifica, Humanitas. We are facing a pivotal choice, either to construct a new Tower of Babel or to build the city in which God and humanity dwell together. These are the words of Pope Leo XIV in his newest encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas, the magnificence of humanity. Luca, would you like to sum up what exactly is Pope Leo addressing in this encyclical? Some would argue it's an interesting one to bring out as his first. Some would argue it's actually quite brilliant. I mean, it's polarized people on the internet. Luca, what's your take on it?
Sounds like we know what his opinion is already. So basically, Pope Leo has come out and he's not condemned AI, which some people on the sort of right are very unhappy with. He's not said, yeah, let's but he's sort of met in the middle, which is quite good of him, I think, actually, and said, look, AI it's not good, it's not bad, but we can use it, but it should not displace humans. And just like his predecessor Leo, not direct predecessor, but the last Leo the 13th, with Rerum Novarum, which was sort of about let's not let machines and capitalism displace labor and property and farms and human dignity. He's done that. Leo XIV has done the same, but with AI. So I think it's quite interesting. He's also gone on to mention some things about slavery and the just war theory. But on AI, he sort of said it sort of needs to be disarmed. And do you have anything to add?
So what Leo's done here is he's not just doing an AI encyclical, as some people will dumb it down to. What he's doing here is he is completely redefining the way we as Catholics should be looking at church social teaching and doctrine. And he has revitalized church social teaching and doctrine for the 21st century. Gone are the days where mass industrialization will define the new industrial revolution. I think academics and scholars argue it's either the fourth or the fifth, whichever one you decide to talk to on the day. We are in the fourth or the fifth industrial revolution, the age of AI. And Pope Leo, as a result, is looking to AI and approaching it as the church should, in a pragmatic way. He's not going hardline in either direction. He's not endorsing AI. So yeah, just to carry on with what I was saying, he's not going through with a full endorsing of AI. He's not going all the way in that direction, nor is he going all the way in the other direction where he's saying AI is something that should be completely abolished. I think it would be unreasonable for him to say that, and I'm sure he'd agree with that point. So therefore, he's reapproaching how we look at technology from the perspective that at no point in human history should technology ever be allowed to replace humanity, should ever be allowed to come on par with humanity. It was the same thing with Leo XIII and his Rerum Novarum addressing the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to use this term a lot in the episode, transhumanism, that idea of humanity can become integrated with technology, and technology can be used to build humanity up. Some transhumanist things, for example, would be looking into new bionic skeletons that can make the human being immortal. I mean, no Catholic on the planet, I hope, would want to be immortal, because the only immortality that comes for us as human beings is what comes after death. So I think it's very appropriate. It's an interesting time we live in. It's probably not what I would have done as my first encyclical if I was in his position. Especially because the date he decided to publish it on was the 100 and something anniversary of Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum. It's very deliberate that he chose to do it on that day, and he's establishing a clear continuity. If I was doing that, I would have wrote on Catholic corporatism and distributism and economic policy for the today.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about doing that is how do you apply corporatism to it? I know this isn't what we're talking about today, but it's difficult to apply to the modern world. I suppose the thing that I find with his AI document is I don't really think it says much. I mean, he's sort of saying it can be dangerous if used badly. It can be good, but okay, what do I really need to take? What do I really take home from that? For me, reading, I don't find AI that interesting. Maybe that's why I'd rather speak about non-tech, tech stuff. But it was a bit of a word salad for me. I was like, okay, he's just sort of sat in the middle, which is the only thing you can do, I suppose, because it's so early days with AI. Like it could change. Like next year it'll be different again. So it's a good move, I suppose, from him. I don't want to be entirely critical of it because it needed to be talked about sometime soon. But yeah, he also he did a speech before the encyclical, which was interesting. That's never been done before. And at the speech was one of the co-owners of Anthropic, I think. Well, I don't know his name, but that was good to see. That was good to see that some people inside the tech world are actually on board with what he's saying, which is hopeful because as many people are scared it's just going to destroy humanity. Mm-hmm. I don't think that personally.
But. No, I think it's a bit nutty to think that AI is going to one day gain consciousness and take over. Yeah. I mean, that's like fantasy stuff. That's the sort of stuff you read about in your fiction novels. But he's approaching AI as the Catholic Church should, with virtues and the common good and natural law, always in the conscious. And through that, he is telling us as Catholics how we as individuals should take an approach to AI. We should never at any point allow AI to become this sort of unfettered thing that drives greed and strives to manipulate people and to take advantage of those at the lowest in society. At no point should AI become a tool of that. He also very importantly addressed how AI is used in warfare. We are now seeing, I mean, the Russo-Ukrainian war is the best example of this in the world right now. You have these unmanned drones, and these drone systems are actually integrating AI, and it's the question of, well, how does AI operate a killing machine? How does it decide who gets killed and who doesn't kill? And if AI is just becoming a killing machine, that's something we should be worried about, because let's say the worst case scenario does happen and AI becomes too smart for its own good. Who's going to be able to prevent these killing machines going around? So it's good that he's addressed that. He's also going back on the just war theory. from St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas and saying, well, just war theory has actually been appropriated in recent times and it's being used to justify some horrible things in the world. And he's saying instead, look, we've got this technology that could cause real devastation. In fact, it is causing degrees of devastation to civilian populations. It needs to be toned down, and we need to always, when we're pursuing development of these technologies, which is a good thing. It's a good thing to develop things as a society. It's how, as a society, we escaped from the Stone Age and using sticks and stones to do everything. It's good to pursue that thing, but we need to pursue it with the common good and with virtues, hand in hand, always in our conscience.
I think I have to disagree a bit with you there, because the just war theory, Pope Leo said, is outdated. But and I know when Augustine was writing this in like the 4th century, he probably wasn't imagining machine guns or drones just killing people from miles and miles away in different countries, like a remote control, like a PlayStation, just killing loads of people. But I mean, this is written in this very catechism, the just war theory and doctrine. And I think to say it's outdated, this worried me a bit when I was reading it. I thought, okay, so it's outdated. What are we going to do? We're just going to abolish it completely? Well, he wasn't very specific, is what I'm saying here. Now, if it needs updating, I think that's better words. But outdated, I don't know. How can we just change this 1,000-year-old worth of teaching that's written in all the catechisms up now, and just say, oh yeah, we're changing it, by the way? But if he means we're going to adapt it, I don't know how do we actually adapt it to mention AI? Because right now, let's look at Donald Trump. He's not even following the just war theory and actually arguing with the Pope. So just if the Pope says, oh okay, AI is bad, like, well, okay, well, what are they actually going to do? What can he say to update the just war theory is what I'm thinking, because it's tradition, and it's we followed this for so many years. To say it's outdated, it made me a little bit worried. But what do you think about that?
I don't think Leo is being entirely cynical about the just war theory, and I don't think he's saying, "Oh, I'm going to rip it up tomorrow, and we're going to make a new just war theory that has AI in big bold letters." I think he's recognizing that since the time of Thomas Aquinas, I mean, perhaps today it's not really a common thing, because I mean, Catholic countries in of themselves are unfortunately falling in number since they were 300, 400 years ago. You don't really have examples today of world leaders who are trying to say their war is just through Catholic just war theory. Yeah. But certainly in the time of the Counter-Reformation and the 1600s, around to about the 1800s, you would have had countries using the just war theory incorrectly to justify their conflicts. And that was in the time of Leo XIII, where technology developed from using muskets and bayonets and flintlock rifles to now using machine guns.
Machine guns, like
that's a complete transition of how warfare is fought. World War One and World War Two, you had Pope Pius XII speaking about how the war was being fought, and how this isn't what humanity should be doing to one another. That's not what God made us for. It's the same with AI. You've got companies like Palantir who are doing these huge defense contracts, and AI is bound to play a role in how that happens. You've got these, like I mentioned earlier, these unmanned drone systems which are becoming autonomous in the sense that they're being run by AI systems. How can this be? How can you have systems which involves no human thought whatsoever? So there's no kill switch. There's no human who's on standby. I mean, in some cases that there will be, but it's obvious what the next step is. The next step is where you're having these drone hubs that aren't being manned by anyone at all, so that if they're hit by opposing drones, there's no casualties.
So what do you change? You're saying it's outdated. Like, what do you change about it then? I know you're not the Pope, but what
Perhaps reaffirming what it is that the just war theory stood for upon its establishment. The whole reason that Thomas Aquinas in the 14th century, in the 13th, 14th century, decided to put this down on pen and paper is because it was the medieval period where, I mean, if a loaf of bread got stolen, you'd go up in arms and fight over it. Some would argue that certain wars today are just as petty in that sense. In terms of how do you take a piece of a church doctrine that is hundreds and hundreds of years old and update it for the future? It's like you said, I'm not the Pope. I'm unsure how they can do this in a way that pleases everyone. I don't know. I mean, if you were to approach the just war theory, and I mean, first of all, I'd have to ask you: do you recognise that the just war theory has been appropriated in the past to justify conflicts that aren't in fact just wars?
I mean, yeah, it has, but that's not been following the guidelines. You know, if you do follow those guidelines, you will get a just war. But if someone sort of lies or changes the nature of what's happened to fit into those lines, then it's obviously not a just war. Yeah.
So then, therefore, perhaps the best way of updating it would be saying, look, in order for a war to be considered just, it needs papal backing, perhaps?
You could say that. I was just thinking that myself. You know, the Pope wouldn't be corrupt, would he? If I'm sure he has.
But equally, I think that argument would be flawed because let's say there is a situation where a just war is the only solution. Would the Pope then have the willpower? I mean, Pope Francis certainly wouldn't, to then say we need to fight a war to solve this issue.
Yeah, I mean, look at Iran, what's happening in Iran, and you've got J.D. Vance telling the Pope he shouldn't speak about theology. I mean, one of the most cleverest people on the earth about theology, if not the cleverest, backed by the Holy Spirit, and you're telling him you can't debate theology. So I don't know how you would change it, which is why I just wouldn't change it. And I would say, look, it's not outdated, but people have been changing it or trying to fit inside those lines, but instead we'll just condemn them and keep it as normal because it's worked up until now, and I know that warfare is changing like year by year. It was, look at the nuclear bomb. I mean, that was dropped like 80 years ago in Japan, and we couldn't even imagine that like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But so it is changing. Maybe it does need change. Maybe I'm being stubborn and too traditional, but that's just my view. I wouldn't change it. I would just be strict on it.
It's very difficult to do, and Leo clearly is being smart in how he addresses it, in that he's only setting up something for the future. I'm sure in future encyclicals, long may he reign, he will eventually address this issue further. That's what he's doing in this encyclical in many different regards, in the church social teaching, in the way he approaches just war theory. He's setting up something that will then be addressed in the future. So we can only wait and see what exactly he does about just war theory. It's very difficult to change a piece of church doctrine that's gone for 100 years. But then again, you only have to look at something like the Second Vatican Council and see how so dramatically the church structure can be changed.
This is true.
Anyway, I think it would be best now we move on to another point about the encyclical. So he's used this analogy that we stand at this sort of crossroads as humanity, whether to build this new Tower of Babel, which he seems to think we're on the course of doing right now with AI, or whether we make the choice, we follow the example of Nehemiah, who he quotes numerous times. Some people aren't really big fans of how he quoted that. And we build a New Jerusalem, and we strive towards God's kingdom on earth and what comes after life. So what your opinions on this analogy? Do you think it's a good, useful analogy? And yeah, just your thoughts.
I like the analogy. I'll just briefly explain because, maybe as Catholics it's easy to speak about this, but if we have non-Catholic listeners and you're still listening, the Tower of Babel. So if you read Genesis, after the flood there was, so the story goes, after the flood there was one city where all the people in the world spoke one language, and they decided, let's go and reach God. How cool would that be? Let's all build this massive tower all the way up to heaven. But this wasn't done to glorify God or to thank him or praise him. It was done instead for pride. So they were building up, and then God sort of dispersed everyone around the world again. and because it was for pride, not for glorifying God. So I think this is very, very good example and analogy from the Pope. And when I was reading it, I thought, yeah, I've never thought of it like that. So it was good because AI, is replacing humans, taking jobs, taking human dignity. Sort of, if we look at what Pope 13 said, private property, you need to. Jobs is not just about money, it's about caring for your family, having a purpose. It's a very important thing. And, AI just for our pride to see how much we can do. But in the meantime, getting rid of humans, that's not good at all. So that was very good. In terms of rebuilding Jerusalem, if we use AI in a good way, we can definitely use it for the good and to make a great society if humans keep their dignity in it. So I think it was a great analogy. I've never heard anyone say like that before, so I was very pleased with that.
Yeah, just building on to that point about pride, I mean, I think pride plays a huge role in how AI is being developed today. You've got the AI arms race, which is happening between the USA and China. You've got the stock markets, and you've got chips like NVIDIA, which are so volatile in how the pricing works. And the fact that these prices are so volatile to do with war, I think is quite worrying, because that's a sign of just how big of a role AI is playing in warfare. So for him to go out and to basically point the finger at these CEOs of the companies and the ones who are driving this AI arms race, perhaps not for the need of innovation, but for personal pride and for personal gain through vast amounts of money, he's pointing the finger at them and he's saying, well, look, here's what I've got to say. You've now got a choice. Are you building these AI systems for the good of humanity, to aid technology and to aid development? Or are you building it for your own personal gain? Do you want to be the person who is written in the history books as the innovator, the one who created humanoid AIs or whatever else that it might be these AI bosses strive towards? It's a smart move from Leo, and it's also a very daring move for him to make. And I admire his boldness on a topic which requires such boldness, and a topic that perhaps our last Pope, God rest his soul, wouldn't have been so bold about.
Yeah. There's been people calling for trad Catholics. I would consider myself a traditional Catholic, but it doesn't mean I agree with everything we say. But there's been some traditional Catholics saying we need a complete ban of AI. Why is the Pope not just completely banned AI? And I can sort of see what they're saying, because the billionaires, maybe you'll disagree, but they are doing it for money. They are doing whatever just to pillage, and for the stock markets they can get more money, for pride. So you could say we need a complete ban of AI, but I think AI, if used right and correctly, will definitely help humanity in a good way. So I think this was actually the right move on this occasion from Leo, because he's sort of condemning them, and hopefully they listen to him, because he's a very wise man. But the Tower of Babel was just so good. It was such.
He's got a good reaction out of it as well. There's examples of AI CEOs who are now polarized on this issue, and just like the people who were building the Tower of Babel, they've all been casted away, and they're all confused, and they're all saying different things to one another. These AI CEOs, they don't know what to think. Some of them are actually agreeing with what Leo says. Others are completely condemning it and saying, "Well, how can that apply to me?" And I think it's all very, very telltale for us ordinary commoners, us peasants, to see Leo's really hit a sore spot for some of these people.
From the south side.
And he's done very well in that, and I admire him for that. So,
shall we talk about
the point about slavery? Yeah.
So Pope Leo said that he apologizes for the church's role in slavery. Now, I disagree on Leo for that. I disagree on him for that, because, as we were saying earlier about the British flag, I don't know what you think on this. We've not spoken about the encyclical yet, really, so that
we've saved it for this podcast.
It's natural. A pope who's not done anything to help slavery, apologising to people who have never been in slavery. It's the same for the British flag. Why should I apologise as a Briton for what people 200 years ago did? So me apologising to someone who's never been a slave, to me who's never been a slave owner, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't think we should be apologising for slavery. We can say it's wrong. It's definitely wrong. And modern slavery is still going on throughout the world.
The United Kingdom is actually, there was a news story, a headline, how the United Kingdom is actually the leading country in the world for modern slavery. It is awful how
Oof,
modern
not heard that.
slavery, for those who don't know what modern slavery is, it's not the slavery of old where you just wouldn't get paid. It's where those the managers who run the jobs and who decide the pay cuts, they do so in a way that ensures that their workers are entirely dependent on their job, on their bosses for how they live their day-to-day lives. The United Kingdom is first in the world for that. That is shocking. Anyway, continue your point about modern slavery.
I guess he's done it because AI can make us slaves. We can become slaves to AI. So it's good to speak about slavery, I suppose. But I don't think he should no, he should condemn slavery, of course. I don't think he should apologize, sorry, for something that he's not been involved in. And lots of people are very happy about this. Lots of people are very sad. But what sort of slavery has he condemned? Just slavery in general, or because there's white slavery, there's slavery in Asia, there's slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. There's been many forms of slavery. So if he just is apologizing for black slavery, I need to be careful how I say it, but he should be apologizing for all forms of slavery. Maybe I read it wrong, because if he is apologizing for all sorts of slavery, then my statement is incorrect. So I'll be happy to be corrected on that. But yeah, I don't think he should be apologizing for it, simply because I completely agree slavery is awful, should never happen, is against human dignity, should never happen. But he's not been involved in slavery, so I don't know if he should be apologizing for it. What do you think?
I think the issue with apologizing on something like this is that it then leads to a slippery slope, because the one of the main reasons, by the way, that the UK government isn't apologizing for slavery is because what comes after the apology, well, the logical thing that comes after is you've apologized, now it's time to earn our forgiveness, pay up reparations. Can the Vatican pay reparations?
Yes.
Yes, they can. Look what's in their
Look in the
vault.
vaults. Yeah.
I've actually been there. It is beautiful in the St. Peter's Basilica. But that's what comes next after reparations. And I'm sorry if this is controversial to say. On some issues, you just can't afford to budge, because once you give, you can only give so much more. And once people see that they can take something from you, they will take and they will take and they will take.
Completely agree.
And slavery is awful, and slavery deserves to be condemned in all of its forms, including in its modern forms. And but for Leo to do his apology in a way that was so personal, that's quite strange.
I thought it would come from Francis, not Leo.
It's not.
Surprising.
Perhaps Francis agreed with what we're saying here, where the only logical thing after an apology is reparations. I mean, who knows? Perhaps people will ask for reparations. Leo will say, hang on a minute, that's not where we're going with this, which, I'll agree with him on. But if, unfortunately, it goes down the way that I'm sort of reading here, with such a personal apology that he's done here, he's saying, I apologize for the church's role in slavery in all forms. That to me, that there's a difference between condemning something and then apologizing, because you apologize, you're tying yourself back up into the web of it. And
I would be curious to sort of understand more. I'm not educated well in the church's history and slavery, but how has the church, what has the church done that he needs to apologize for? I don't actually know. I need to find out more about that. But
I mean, to really put it in a nutshell, the church was just played a big role in civilization missions. So the role of white European explorers, settlers, merchants, so on and so forth, from Spain, Portugal, and France, the great Catholic powers of Europe, involved in the transatlantic slave trade and involved in the colonization of North and South America. The church actually actively promoted these missions because it was seen as civilizing, and in the sense that you're going out and you're converting. And there's actually some views from black people, so African Americans who are Catholic today, where they will actually say, if I was on that boat today, coming across the water, I would thank those taking me.
There's a saint.
I would thank those taking me, because they were the ones who had me convert to Christianity. That there is a bittersweet fact in there that the church's role in I'll have to be careful what I say here. The church's role in the transatlantic slave trade, it was iffy, in that by promoting something that caused innumerable amount of suffering and hardship, for these people going across on those boats across the Atlantic. But also, in the same way I was discussing with the British Empire earlier in the question time, and how the British Empire has so many good things, more so than it has bad things, in that it exports the rule of law. The British Empire exported democracy. It exports Westminster democracy. It exports Christianity. Those are things that the British Empire should be proud about. And in the same way, the Church should be proud in their role throughout their entire history of going out and making disciples of all nations. To quote the end of the gospel. To quote, that's what the Church is all about: proselytizing and being a missionary in all corners of the planet. That's not something to apologize for. So, linking that back to slavery, to apologize for the Church's role in slavery, perhaps he shouldn't be so vague in how he does it. He should be more explicit in saying, here's what we got wrong, equally, here's what we got right, and here's how we're going forward. If you have a bit more structure to how you're doing an apology, rather than just, trying to be one and done and get it over with and just sweep it back under the rug so everyone forgets about it, that's not the right way of doing things. I will agree with Luca on this one. Pope Leo perhaps has got it wrong. There's nothing wrong with condemning slavery, but to do it in the way that he has done, where he's perhaps leaving the door open now for reparations, that's not something that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I condemn slavery, just to
as if we haven't said it enough. We don't agree with slavery, and just because we're saying that you shouldn't apologize for slavery doesn't mean we're agreeing with slavery. That's a clear moral principle we need to get cleared up.
But just to carry on there, sorry about the cut. We had a technical issue. I just had one last point about the Pope Leo calling just war theory outdated, and that was, if you can call this outdated, which is in the Catechism, then what's to stop him saying that not having female priests is outdated, and other things along those lines. So that was one of my concerns, and I'll just have to wrap it up quite quickly now. But do you have anything else to say?
Just on that point, I think it is a valid concern, and I'm sure Luca is echoing the concerns of many traditional and conservative Catholics, in the same way that there would have been some initial backlash to Vatican II and thinking, well, we're going back on so much predetermined church doctrine, what's stopping them from going the extra step? I wouldn't be entirely dissuaded by what Leo is doing here. He is approaching war from the lens of AI and saying that, well, AI is a good example of how perhaps there's no such thing as a just war, because no matter what, war is going to lead to the countless destruction of lives, and that in itself is enough of an evil to never justify conflict. So perhaps that's probably his take on it, and I'm not particularly buying into the belief that just because he said that about just war will mean that he will then go ahead and allow female priests. He'll then go ahead and allow gay marriage, and fingers crossed that nothing too drastic will come out in the coming years, and I'll be forced to go back on myself there. And that's all I have to think on that.
Well, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you leave comments, and any video topics you'd like us to talk about, leave in the comments, leave questions, leave statements if you agree, disagree. Share with your friends, and hopefully we can grow this podcast. This is Common Cause signing out. Goodbye.